All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are live here at City Hall. Specifically, we have taken over City Manager Brian Cook's office, especially for today's session. We have the privilege of having our planning manager, Scott Reimers, here to talk to us about the adoption of the recent specific plan and to kind of go over with us a lot of the overall details. And then we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the specifics and bring up some of the more common questions that we have heard from the community. And so thank you for being here with us today.
Of course, it's a pleasure.
Great. And so we'll get right into it. So one of the first, so we'll start off with the first question. Many community members have heard about this recent adoption of the specific plan, which is also a component of the overall general plan that we had also adopted. Can you tell us what exactly is it, and why is it so important to Temple City and all of its residents?
Sure. Well, let me start with the process. This process started with the general plan, and during the general plan process, we had a lot of community meetings and started to find out what was on people's minds. Through that, we found out there were concerns about a lot of people saying that they spent a lot of time going out of Temple City, going to places like Pasadena, going to places like Arcadia, Monrovia, in order to shop, in order to eat, in order to dine, in order to meet up with friends. And so people, we heard, wanted to have a place in Temple City that they could go to. Through that process, we also heard a lot of comments about Temple City needing more open space. We heard people talking about the need for more housing, that as family members leave to go away to school, that they try to come back to the market and they just can't afford to get in. So we heard concerns about housing. And then there's also been some concerns about what happens if Kmart goes out of business and what would be the future of that site. So based on the feedback we got through the general plan, we moved forward on a specific plan. So the specific plan, the Crossroads specific plan, is located at the intersection of Las Tunas Drive and Rosemead Boulevard. It goes up to Hermosa on the north and then follows the flood control channel on the south. It's not, first of all, it is not a redevelopment plan. The city is not going to be purchasing people's properties and then developing them. It's a specific plan, and a specific plan includes goals and policies for the area. It includes like a mini zoning code. It has a mini set of design guidelines. It has an implementation plan, an infrastructure plan. So it's really a plan for how property owners can develop their site in the way that they want. It's based on several guiding ideas and a vision. And one is to create a sense of vitality within Temple City, a place where people would have a sense of pride, that they could take their friends and their neighbors or relatives to this area, and that could be a place where they shop, where they eat, where they sit in a cafe. It could even be a place of recreation. So this is a place that would have open space, it would have amenities, plazas. It would include improving the Eaton Creek or the Eaton Wash. It would be pedestrian oriented, but it would also have options, like people could ride their bikes there using Rosemead Boulevard. They could drive there, they could walk there. So it would be a place with different options. And the buildings would be clustered around these open spaces, which would be lined with cafes. And then there would be housing on the upper floors.
All right, great. And I think I'll add one comment, which I think is really important. I think during the period where we were developing not just the general plan, but the specific plan as well, a lot of people thought it was a redevelopment plan in the conventional sense. And we know for a fact that the state kind of did away with that some years ago. So the city really doesn't have any power or say in actually taking over private property for that purpose, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, good. So, okay, great. Thank you for getting into it. Now, yeah, and so for everyone who's watching, this graphic illustrates the zone that Scott was talking about earlier. So if we dive deeper into the specific plan, we know that it is broken up into districts. So if you could please go over the different districts and why was it broken up that way and what are the implications of each of these districts?
There are two fundamental principles of the specific plan, and those are transition and focus. So in the general plan, we decided that if we were going to allow housing growth, that we would want to focus it away from our established residential neighborhoods, our single-family neighborhoods, and focus it within an area where we could get some community benefits and some community amenities with that growth. But then, as we create that growth, we also wanted to make sure that it transitioned appropriately back to the residential neighborhoods. So that was a key part of how we divided up the specific plan area. So the specific plan area is made up of 4 districts. The first district is called the mixed-use core. That is the area that's south of Las Tunas and on the west side of Rosemead Boulevard, going south to Eaton Wash. Within that area is where we have the existing Kmart and the existing Office Depot. Within that, we would be looking for some amenities to go along with this focused growth. And those amenities would be open space for children to play in. It would be plazas that people could meet at. It would be breaking up large-scale development into smaller pieces and then building those pieces around public plazas and open spaces. We would also be looking for some improvements along Eaton Wash. So it would transition from, it would be, and here's an image of what it might look like, where the white buildings in the middle are clustered around a new street system. So a street running from north-south, and then maybe 2 or 3 streets running east-west. And then that what helps break down the structures into smaller pieces. And then each of those would be built around some open space.
So when you talk about streets, these are actually going to be streets within the private property.
Right, right.
So it's not like the city is going to be creating a new street through private property.
Right, it'd be like a large driveway.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And then again, one of the keys to this was making sure that we step down and transition the buildings into something that would fit into our residential neighborhoods. So the highest amount of growth would be focused into the west side of the project site, and that would allow up to 6 stories. And then that 6-story height would have to be set back 300 feet from Rosemead Boulevard. So that's a significant amount. That's approximately where the buildings are now. And then after that, it would have to step down to 4 stories. So that's one of the key principles of the plan, is to continually step down the buildings as they get closer to the residential neighborhoods. So within the development, we would be looking at some new driveways, but these are much larger than any driveway you would typically expect. So we would even have perhaps some driveways that have a center median and a lane of traffic in either direction and a parking lane in either direction with trees and sidewalks. So it would feel like a street, but it would be run by the private developer. And then, as you can see in this graphic as well, on either side of the street, you would have ground floor retail or commercial, restaurants, cafes, and then the upper stories are shown in yellow. And those, again, are stepping down from 6 stories in height from the west side of the project to 4 stories in height on the east side as you get closer to Rosemead Boulevard. And then those are even stepped back at each floor.
Now, maybe we stay on this slide.
Yeah.
So just for everyone's clarification, I think one of the questions that we get asked is, is this exactly how it's going to be developed, like this specific configuration, these specific clusters? This is more of just sort of like a projection of what's possible, right? It's not like we're limiting the developer to say you can only do it this way. Is that correct?
Right. So these concepts were based on the policies and the goals within the specific plan, but the interior driveways may be aligned differently. They may be aligned more creatively. They may be located further north or further south. There might be a different number of them, but these are some of the basic goals and principles when you start putting pen to paper what they might look like.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. All right. Yeah, and I think a very important thing you also brought up is the transition from these zones, these commercial mixed-use zones, to the majority of Temple City is single-family residences. So that the whole stepping down or stepping back of the higher stories, because Temple City, we don't really have anything that's really that high.
Right.
So I thought that was an important point that you brought up was how do we buffer and transition from these areas back to our single family residences. So thanks for bringing that up.
Sure, sure.
All right, and so another common question is that, these different districts have different land uses that are designated. Now, are they really achievable, or are we really talking about pie in the sky, pipe dream kind of ideas?
No, I think it is very achievable. As we were going through the process, we spoke to economists to find out what was happening in the market. And there's two very clear trends that are happening in the market. One is that there is a housing crisis. There's a very strong demand for housing, and the supply for housing is very small. That's something that we wanted to be responsive to, because at the same time there's another crisis which is occurring, and that's a retail crisis. We can see that a lot of the large big box retailers are either not expanding or they're closing. We can see that malls are having a hard time filling vacancies, and they're turning to restaurants to fill those vacancies. So we tried to look at those two economic realities and see how they would play out within the specific plan. We've heard that people wanted to see new commercial growth because they wanted to have places where they didn't have to leave Temple City. In order to get that, we need to provide an economic incentive to the developer. So that's why we started to look at providing residential on site on the upper stories. That provides the economic benefit to the developer to build the commercial on the ground floor.
So actually that's a great point. Maybe to go a little bit deeper into that. So another way to say what you just said is, from an economic standpoint, it is not very viable for developers to only develop commercial. They need that residential mixed-use component built in to allow for that economic viability.
Right, we're seeing very little commercial-only growth.
I see.
In the market, especially as we're seeing more and more vacancies within the retail sector. That's exactly as you said. That's why we're seeing more residential growth that drives the commercial growth.
Okay, and we can also say that in neighboring surrounding areas, our neighboring municipalities, we also see that same trend, trending towards that, right?
Right. I mean, we can look at Arcadia and the Arcadia Mall, where a lot of the vacancies, they're having trouble filling the retail vacancies, so they're turning to restaurants to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Good. All right. Well, yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off from that one. Was there something you wanted to go more into about the?
Sure. So, in response to the housing crisis and to this retail crisis, we looked at each of the zones within the specific plan and tried to find a way to be responsive to that. Within the purple area, which is the mixed-use core, right, on the south of Las Tunas and west of Rosemead, we wanted to bring in that commercial growth, so we added the mixed use. On the opposite side of the street, on the mixed-use boulevard, on the blue area, there we realized that where we've seen mixed-use growth occur in some of our neighboring jurisdictions, they've been having a lot of trouble filling some of the retail spaces in those mixed-use developments.
Oh, interesting.
So what we've done on that side of the street is we've allowed for a larger spectrum of commercial businesses on the ground floor. Some cities will only allow retail or restaurant uses on the ground floor. Understanding the economic realities, we would allow businesses like personal service businesses, offices on the ground floor. And then further from the intersections, we would even allow some residential walk-up type units on the ground floor.
Oh, okay.
So all of this, though, is really trying to give options to our residents. As our younger residents want to start getting into the housing market,